Good morning. Welcome to Ascension Church Online. My name is Luke. I'm a curate here. And I'm going to be thinking a bit this morning with you about that passage we just heard. What an amazing way it ends with a leper, a Samaritan, falling at Jesus' feet in thankfulness. And I want to start by telling you about the most thankful person that I have met recently. This person took me by surprise because they were also the most annoying person I've met recently and the most troublemaking person I've met recently. But before I tell you about this person, I'm just going to set the scene a little bit. Imagine you're in Parish Coffee. It's a Wednesday afternoon and you're in Parish Coffee, our lovely, warm, welcoming cafe here at Ascension Church. And people are enjoying the space. There's a couple of women catching up over a coffee. There's some local mums playing with their babies. There's some nice worshipful music playing in the background. Dan, our cafe manager, is there. He gives you a wave and a smile, and all is well with the world. But then you hear a rowdy chorus of shouting and laughing from what sounds like outside the building. And this noise gets louder and louder and then bursts through the door. And your head turns to the door, and there you see some marching, some running, maybe 10, a dozen, 17 and 18-year-old kids. And before you know it, another group come in. And then another group come in. And the place is overrun all of a sudden by young people who look like this. We've got some photographs of them, which are going to come up. There's one group of them. And let's have the next one. And then there's some more of them. These kids, all of a sudden, running into Parish Coffee. They're everywhere. They're grabbing hot chocolates. They're scooping up donuts from the snack table. There's music blaring from their phones. And Parish Coffee is transformed. In a good way or a bad way? What do you think? Well, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the drop-in for students at St. Francis Xavier or SFX, Sixth Form College across the road from here. It happens every Wednesday, the drop-in from 3 to 4 p.m. at Parish Coffee. And it ran through September and October. And I wonder what you think about it. What do you think of that vision? How does it make you feel as this scene plays out and you're stood in the middle of it? Well, the couple of women I mentioned sitting on the table with their coffees made it pretty clear how they felt. They were both Christians, but they were so incensed by these young people that they actually complained. They said that they'd come to Parish Coffee because they wanted to have a nice, quiet catch-up. And now look at all of this. What's going on? That's what they felt. Let me tell you what I felt, and perhaps you'll be able to sympathize with some of it. I was leading the drop-in. I've led the drop-in through September and October. Really enjoyed it. It's been a real privilege. But at this moment, part of me felt happy, overjoyed even. I felt, yes, it's working. We've set up this drop-in in order to invite these students in, and they're here, they're coming. Wonderful. Praise God. Another part of me felt something else. A bit of fear, a bit of nervousness, a bit of annoyance, a bit of suspicion, unease, a bit of adrenaline. Why? What was going on in me and other people in the cafe? Why was it making us feel like that? What's the reason for that? Well, one reason is that these young people are not like me. They are mysterious to me in many ways. The ways they speak and dress, the music they listen to, the way they talk to each other, the way they behave and respond. It's not what I know. And therefore, it makes me feel a bit unease, a bit on edge. Another reason for these feelings probably is that they came in big groups, in groups bigger than 6. Now, big groups can be a little bit scary anyway, but in these coronavirus times, a big group is not only a bit scary, it's actually unclean, unsanitary. If you see a big group of people, it might make you react viscerally, the way that if you saw someone on the tube without a mask on, it might make you react viscerally. It might make you scrunch your nose up, or react with disgust almost. That's unclean, that's dangerous, that's dirty, stay away. So I think that was part of it as well. And a final reason for me feeling a bit like I did is, and I don't use this word lightly at all, racism. Now, these young people were mainly black young people. And it is probable that many of us here have been conditioned to view black young people with some of those feelings, suspicion, distrust, fear maybe. And the reason for that is because we live in a structurally racist culture, society. That's a fact. And if you needed proof for that, then it's been pretty brutally highlighted, hasn't it, over this coronavirus period, by the way that the virus has disproportionately affected people from ethnic minorities. We do live in a structurally racist society where if you're a young black person, especially a young black male person, you are likely to be an object of suspicion. Unfounded suspicion, but suspicion nonetheless. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine every time you step onto the street or walk into a room or get into your car, knowing that you're an object of suspicion and distrust to people around you because of the skin that you were born with? Can you imagine that? Maybe you do experience that. And as much as I really hate it, and despite having friends who are black and colleagues who are black, and in my previous job working with loads of black kids and young people in Kennington, I have been conditioned in such a way that when I see a big group of young black people, despite myself, alarm bells go off. That unfounded suspicion rears its ugly head. And that's one small, perhaps relatively harmless sign of a big and harmful dysfunction called racism that runs deep in our society and in our hearts. Let's watch a short video clip.
Look at it all kicking off in there.
It's typical, isn't it?
It's just so aggressive.
Hey, it's probably a drug deal gone wrong or something.
So, good Capulet, whose name I tender daily as my own. Be satisfied.
Oh, calm.
Do you think I should call the police?
No, don't. There might be others around. Leave it.
Vile submission. And that Stoccato carries it away. Tybalt, you rat catcher. Will you walk? Yeah. That was nice.
Thank you.
I think we can.
There we go. These students from the Sixth Form College coming into Parish Coffee this autumn have made me realize that something a little bit like that goes on in me. And my guess is that it does for many of us watching here today. As much as it hurts to admit it, we all have unhealthy prejudices, unhealthy, prejudiced perspectives. Some of them are political, some of them are social, some of them are to do with class, some of them are to do with sexuality, some of them are to do with xenophobia, and some of them are racial. But all of them unhealthy perspectives, living in me and you. Right, that's it. That's my scene setting. Should we all take a deep breath? Goodness. Now, having set that scene, I'm now ready to tell you about that most thankful person that I've met recently, who I mentioned. His name is Dami. Dami is one of these students. He's very charming, he's handsome, he's funny, but he's naughty. He's the ringleader. He's the one who causes trouble. Nothing really bad at all, but he's the one who has the confidence to push the boundaries a little bit. He and his friends are always the ones who poor Dan in the cafe has to go and ask kindly to stay in groups smaller than 6, or kindly stop jumping on the sofas, or kindly watch your language. Now, on one of these Wednesday drop-ins, I did a 5-minute prayer workshop. And I ended up sitting with a group of these students, and together we did some praying. And I suggested that one good way to start praying is to say thank you to God. Become aware of what you're grateful for in your life. And so we did this. We closed our eyes and were quiet for a minute, and we thought about what we're thankful for. And then I asked, okay, does anyone want to share what they want to say thank you to God for? Well, it was Dami who really lifted off at this point. He was effusive. He almost got into a stupor of thankfulness, reeling off all kinds of things, big and small, that he wanted to say thank you for. And I was a bit taken aback, and so were his friends actually, because I simply wasn't expecting him to open up like that. So that's Dami. That's the most thankful person that I've met in the past couple of months. And with him in mind, I want us to turn to the passage that we read from Luke's Gospel. Feel free to turn to it in your Bibles from Luke chapter 17, verse 11 onwards. This is a passage about physical healing. Jesus miraculously and effortlessly clears up leprosy from 10 men's bodies in a moment, without even a word. Totally extraordinary, totally impossible, but totally within the power and ability and authority of Jesus. Jesus is the leprosy healer in this passage. But even bigger than that, what I want to suggest is that this passage shows Jesus to be the perspective healer. This is a story not just about healed bodies, but about healed perspectives. Over the past few weeks, we've been thinking about God and health. And what I want to draw out from this passage is that I think Jesus is leading us into what we might call healthy perspectives. Part of a healthy perspective is thankfulness. The lens of thankfulness helps us to pray, helps us to notice God more clearly in our lives. And I think helps us to view the world more accurately. I think there's a real overlap between thankfulness and truthfulness. When you're thankful, you can see more clearly what's actually there right in front of you. In his thankfulness, Dami has a healthier perspective than the two women sitting and complaining about Dami at their table. In his thankfulness, the Samaritan falling at Jesus' feet has a healthier perspective than the 9 other healed men walking off in bemusement. So that's part of it. A healthy perspective is a thankful perspective. But I think Jesus is working a deeper perspective healing in this passage. He's saying something more subtle and more powerful than simply, it's important to be thankful. So let's take a closer look at the passage now. And I'd invite you to look at your Bibles at this point. Jesus and the crowd are journeying from Galilee in the north, south to Jerusalem. And on the way, they walk along the eastern border of Samaria. Samaria was a land that was once the northern kingdom of Israel, until in the 8th century BC it was conquered by the Assyrians, who recolonized it. They brought in people from different places and races and religions. It became a melting pot. And over the centuries, there developed a severe enmity, a severe hatred between the impure, mixed race, mixed religion Samaritans and the remnant of pure Jews. So the reason in this passage that Jesus and the crowd are wandering along the border of Samaria is because they're avoiding going into Samaria. It's a hateful place full of hateful people, and Jews did not go into it. And as Jesus and those with him travel along the border, the passage says that they draw up to a village. And suddenly, they spot a colony of 10 lepers wandering outside the village. Men in rags, men with unspeakable afflictions covering their skin. And the crowd must have reared away in fear and disgust. Because lepers, according to the Mosaic law that these Jews knew and lived by, were ritually unclean. And they lived lives of quarantine. So that the reason Jesus and the crowd find this colony of lepers outside the village is because lepers weren't allowed inside the village. They lived literally on the margins of society. I wonder if you're beginning to see the oppressive boundaries that are present in this story. The national boundary with the hated Samaritans that the Jews cannot cross. The village boundary that the unclean lepers cannot cross. Now, in some ways, these aren't real boundaries. They're just cultural boundaries, boundaries of perspective. And what does Jesus do to them? What's his approach to them? Well, he totally smashes them. He destroys these boundaries. Let's see what happens. The passage goes like this. Keeping their distance, the lepers called out, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. Have pity on us." And Jesus does. He tells them to go and see a priest. Now remember, these lepers are not only medically unhealthy, they're ritually unhealthy. They're unclean. So they need to go and see a priest, not a doctor, to get the all clear. But Jesus just tells them out of the blue to go and see a priest. And they walk off and presumably are pretty bewildered as they walk off. Go and see a priest? What does he mean? We can't see a priest. We can't even go into the village. What's he talking about? Go and see a priest. Is he making fun of us? But then, as they walk away in bemusement, they realize that their skin is clearing up. And one of them, only one of them, who is a Samaritan, runs back to the Jew Jesus, shouting thanks to God, and throws himself at Jesus' feet in gratitude. And Jesus says, "Oh, weren't all of you made clean? Where are the other 9? Has no one else returned to give praise to God except this man, this foreigner from the other side of that border over there? Jesus has told stories about Samaritans, good Samaritans, before. And now here's one right in front of him at his feet. And he makes sure that his followers around him notice it. Has no one else returned to give praise to God except this foreigner? Jesus' actions and words are challenging and healing the perspectives of those around him. Jesus' actions declare, look, lepers are not unclean. Look, Samaritans are not evil. They're not your enemy. Now, we all have unhealthy perspectives, especially when it comes to the way we look at people who are not like us. We absorb unhealthy perspectives, prejudices, racism, discriminatory habits from our culture, from the people and friendships and relationships around us. And we're part of the problem too. We're not just absorbers of bad perspectives, we're peddlers of bad perspectives. But wonderfully, we have a friend in this man, Jesus, God with us. And time spent with him, whether in prayer, in worship, in reading the Bible, in following his instructions, is time spent absorbing God's loving perspective. Jesus was on the way to Jerusalem in this passage. And in Jerusalem, that's where Jesus died on a cross and rose again from the dead. And in doing that, he made God's loving perspective a reality. So that now, when we as Christians look at death, we can say, with God, no, that's life. And as you spend time with Jesus, strange things like that may start to happen to you as God's perspective breaks in. When you see your enemy, you will point and say, no, friend. When you see a stranger, you will say, no, neighbor. These are some of the transformations that come out of a relationship with Jesus. How is Jesus wanting to transform you today? We're going to listen to a piece of music in a moment, and while we do, please talk to Jesus and ask him what boundaries, what prejudices you have assembled, deliberately or by mistake, in your perspectives on other people. Ask Jesus to show you them. Is there a particular person or a type of person who you kind of consider as on the other side from you, as your enemy, your foe? Is there a type of person who makes you feel fearful or suspicious just in virtue of the type of person they are? Take a moment with this music. Let's talk with Jesus now and ask him to show us these people and ask him to turn these boundaries into open doors. It might hurt, but it will liberate you and those around you. So let's take a moment and ask Jesus to heal us now.
And purify my heart. Let me be as gold and precious silver. Purify my heart. Let me